We have a lot of resources that we're utilizing, but we still ask for your help. We ask for any tips that you might have, anything that you might be able to give us.
Should one resource police use on the Moscow murder investigation include private investigators? I'm Angenette Levy, and welcome to Law and Crime's Sidebar podcast. The idea of hiring a private investigator was first floated by Steve Goncalves, the father of victim Kaylee Goncalves. He was very frustrated with what he saw as a lack of progress in the investigation. You will recall that Kaylee and her roommates, Maddie Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Xana's boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, were all stabbed to death in the early morning hours of November 13th. It's been nearly 6 weeks since the homicides occurred. In that time, families have been pleading for information, but police have been keeping much of that information about the case from the public, which happens in criminal investigations. The family of Xana Kernodle sent out flyers this week pleading for anyone with information to come forward. The Moscow Police Department has enlisted the help of both the Idaho State Police and the FBI to solve the case. So, should some of that help come from private investigators? Joining me to discuss whether or not hiring a private investigator for these families to investigate the murders themselves is TJ Ward. He is a private investigator. He's been in the business for 40 years. He has a website, tjwardpi.com, and is also the author of the new book, Guilt by Association. TJ, welcome to Sidebar. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much.
TJ, you're a former law enforcement officer. I'm sure as a law enforcement officer, you wouldn't want people digging around in your cases. I don't know that for sure, but what are your thoughts on this discussion, this idea about the family of Kaylee Goncalves potentially, and I say potentially because we don't know if they've even done that, hiring a private investigator to investigate these murders?
Well, hiring a private investigator is probably an asset to the case because there's a lot of witnesses that we know that probably wouldn't want to talk to law enforcement. And what they would do is talk to somebody that's not associated with law enforcement. And we can gather information probably law enforcement wouldn't get, and we would build a case for them and turn it over to law enforcement.
When you were in law enforcement with Fulton County, would you have wanted a private investigator talking to witnesses for you or running a parallel investigation? Would you have not liked that, or what would your feelings have been about that?
I don't have a problem with a private investigator working a parallel investigation as long as they don't get into areas that might hurt the case or do something that may not be proper that we couldn't use in a court of law later on. And with my experience as a former law enforcement officer, I know what my boundaries are to be able to utilize information and get information for law enforcement to be able to use.
One thing that I thought you said was very interesting is the fact that there are probably witnesses in this case who may not feel comfortable talking to law enforcement. However, they may be more comfortable talking to someone who's not a sworn officer. They may feel like they can be more candid. Have you experienced that in your investigations?
Absolutely, that has happened before, and we build our cases. I build cases. I get hired by lawyers and private individuals and companies to build a case where it would be theft or whatever, and I turn my investigations over to law enforcement, where they take it and use it in an indictment, where I would testify as a professional to be able to testify in court from what information that I found and utilized in the case. Very important. And there are a lot of people that do not like to talk to the police. I mean, the police are the authority. It scares them when they may be a potential witness where they don't want to be. But talking to a private individual, as myself, as a private investigator, they're a little bit more comfortable talking.
I think one of the reasons for that is because, talking to a law enforcement officer, you could get jammed up. I mean, we've heard stories about this where they have arrest powers. The police have a lot of power, and I'm sure the officers in this case want to get it right. They want to get the right person. So, is that one of the reasons why people don't always feel comfortable talking to law enforcement?
That's correct. And it's just the authority that they have and the power that they have, as you mentioned. Law enforcement is a little bit different category, what they're looking for. And people are scared that they're going to get incorporated into a case that they don't want to get incorporated to, but they like to share what they know. It's the same way if they find cameras or find vehicles or identify something that they don't want anybody else to know. Especially in this case in Idaho, that they're looking for vehicles right now. Someone may come forth and feel comfortable talking to a private investigator and giving them information that I'm going to share with law enforcement. And anything that we get, we have a protocol to know if there's law enforcement involved. Anything we compile information, we're going to give to them. And we don't take things in their own hands and go above and beyond what law enforcement would do. We turn it over to them, which builds a relationship with us and law enforcement to know that we're credible.
You mentioned the search for the white Hyundai Elantra. We know earlier this week that one of those white Hyundai Elantras, one of the 22,000 that police are combing through, registrations and things like that, was ruled out in Eugene, Oregon. There was one found on a street corner there. It had been involved in a vehicle accident a couple of days before. It was sitting there with front end damage, no license plates. It certainly looked suspicious. They looked into it. They ruled it out, even though that vehicle is in the range of vehicles that they want to look at, 2011 to 2013. How daunting of a task is that to go through now 21,999 vehicles that you have remaining to try to piece together who may have been in that area that night?
Well, what they have to do is going through 21,999 now is one thing they got the Department of Motor Vehicles that can level down. That's how they come up with a number and be able to go through and see who these people might be, or if a name comes up that they find that matches something that they've got from a witness at the crime scene or somebody that's a witness in this case, and try to match it up with somebody and may have talked to somebody that owns that vehicle. It's unfortunate that they don't have a tag number or a VIN number from what they found. And again, now their problem is being able to locate vehicles. The weather is hampering them unbelievably up there with the snow and ice and the bad weather. So it's going to slow this investigative down, and hopefully it doesn't become a cold case.
You've been in this business a long time, a PI for 40 years. Before that, a law enforcement officer, a sworn officer. From the outside looking in, and we don't know everything that they're doing, of course, but we know that they've got the Moscow PD working on this with the assistance of the FBI and the Idaho State Police. From what we know about what they're doing, we've been told they're using every available resource to look into this. They're combing through the video. They're combing through tips. They have about 15,000 tips now that they have to wade through, which is unbelievable to me. What is your assessment of what's going on with this investigation?
Well, the I don't want to say the problem, but the FBI is well known that they're not going to release any information until they have diehard information they can go public with. So we really don't know what they have. I mean, it was in a very complicated crime scene, and there's things in that crime scene that can lead them to where they are to go to the outside. And again, they're bringing more FBI agents in, I understand, that are an expertise in these type of cases, and to be able to utilize. So again, we don't know what they have or what they don't have, but we have to move forward to keep gathering information. And I think it's real important that this case stays active in the media, because there may be somebody that remembers something or sees what's on TV that might be an asset to them, and they come to us as a private investigator. And if there's one involved in that location up there, or if they end up calling us, because I know they're trying to raise money to hire a private investigator. And again, as I spoke earlier this week, we have two former homicide investigators that work with us, and I would be more than happy to send them there to work hands-on with law enforcement and to help gather information. As again, anything that we learn, if we were working on the case, we would immediately turn it over to law enforcement to enhance their case.
In your experience, is it common to have a private investigator working hand in hand with law enforcement on a murder case that's active and ongoing, such as this one? We're about 40 days in on this case.
Absolutely. If you'll recall, when I worked the case in the disappearance of Natalie Holloway in Aruba, I started gathering information, and unfortunately, I learned that the lead investigator was Vandersloot's godfather, his dad's best friend, and worked in the Administrative Justice with Vandersloot's father from 95 to 98. I went out on the media and put that out there. I mean, that's huge. You got an investigator that's investigating somebody that he's related to is a big problem, a big problem. So I mean, I had to expose that information publicly, and it was not good for law enforcement. But I'm unbeknown to saying that I would do this in this particular instance. But using a private investigator to gather information from private individuals or witnesses that may be involved is an asset to law enforcement in this case. I think law enforcement there, with 3 different agencies working on this case, is an asset, and I think they're doing a great job and best that they can right now. But I just think it would be an asset to have another team of investigators there that the private individuals that we talked about may want to talk to us instead of law enforcement.
Between 10 and 15,000 tips, TJ, that's a lot. 10,000 to 15,000 tips that they're wading through. I have to think that there has to be something in some of those tips that is going to be helpful to this investigation. How difficult is it to go through that many tips? Even if you have 60 FBI agents, Idaho State Police, I can't even imagine.
They have professionals that do this for a living working inside those agencies to be able to go through and filter in on things that may be important in this case. I still get people calling me about a case in 2005 with the disappearance of Natalie Holloway. My phone still rings and I still get emails, and we follow up with those leads as I did from the beginning. So you have to look and take everyone serious that somebody may know something that's going to enhance your case to be able to solve it.
Yeah, and Natalie Holloway, the disappearance of Natalie Holloway, sadly, her body has still never been found. Horrible, horrible thing for her family. One last thing, people are fearful of coming forward if they have information because they are afraid that they are going to get in trouble. Let's say somebody does have information about this case and they fear knowing about it is going to get them in a lot of trouble. What's your recommendation to that person listening to this right now?
If they're so worried about getting in trouble and they have information that may solve a case like this, they need to get a lawyer and get a lawyer to give them information or protect them from any information they give. This car that they're looking for, this individual, is not a suspect. It's a person of interest they're looking for that may have additional information to lead them to solving this case.
Well, TJ Ward, private investigator, you can find him at tjwardpi.com. Also, the author of Guilt by Association. Thanks so much for coming on. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, and happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you and Merry Christmas. And that's it for this edition of Law and Crime Sidebar Podcast. It is produced by Sam Goldberg, Michael Deininger, and Logan Harris. Bobby Szoke is our YouTube manager. Kiera Bronson handles all social media. And Alyssa Fisher is our booking producer. You can listen to and download Sidebar on Apple, Spotify, Google, and wherever else you get your podcasts. And of course, you can always watch it on Law and Crime's YouTube channel. I'm Angenette Levy, and we will see you next time.